A factory chicken lives in a wire cage, interreacts with a food machine and ends in the oven. It's an unfulfilling life. But to Bill, the trauma is not only to the chickens. We miss out when we become separate from animals. He sees our salvation as getting the chickens back home, where they can help us with the gardening.
Well, poultry, ducks and chickens and geese are very much a part of permaculture systems. They have some very essential functions. The chicken in the permaculture garden provides a shredding machine. It provides pest control by eating decayed fruit and the larvae of insects that infest it. And then the garden provides the chicken with all its needs: shelter, other chickens, and its food. And the chicken does nothing that it wouldn't do naturally. In all systems in which we include animals, part of the system, sometimes almost half of the system, can be specifically planted for the animals. And there's a huge energy difference between doing that and feeding a chicken's purchased food.
In a chicken factory, it takes 9 eggs worth of energy to produce 1 egg, which leaves 8 eggs worth of energy to clear out.
So if we're going to keep chickens, we should both satisfy the needs of the chicken and make sure that something in the system uses the outputs of the chicken. So by satisfying its needs, we avoid work. By making sure its outputs are used, we avoid pollution. Pollution is just an unused output of the system.
Millions of tons of food arrive every day, and city people really don't have a clue where it comes from. All we do is pay for it.
In terms of energy costs, food would be about 95% cheaper. I said 95% if it were grown in the city, because just within the city of New York, we lose about 13% of the food in its distribution phase. But 95% of the cost of that food is in carting it to New York, in packaging the food, and in taking the wastes away. Looking around almost every supermarket we enter, it's really hard to believe there's any people hungry in the world or any food crisis. And yet, very little of this food comes from anywhere near the city. And most of it will come from thousands of kilometres away. And a 3-day transport strike, and hardly any of this would be here.
Bill's solution is to grow the food where we live. How realistic is it? In a suburban backyard, one of Mollison's early designs is now reaching maturity. The land covers a 1/4-acre block, and the house is a splendid example of his ideas.
Here's something in the right place. It's the moldboard plough. It's rather like hanging up some of the burners out of the ovens at Dachau, a relic of the age of agriculture which is just passing. And there's plenty of food in this garden. There's no need of ploughs.
There are over 500 species, so that even in winter there's enough food for all the family and neighbours.
Kumquats, Fortunella. One of my favourite fruit, I think, especially after a month or two in brandy and sugar. This is a Japanese parsley. Call these throw-over greens. They're all important to health of chickens. A bath full of Chinese water chestnuts, which are delicious. You can buy them in cans, but here you get them fresh, and they're always crisp. Nothing like sitting by an Indian pond and watching a lot of very graceful women in saris picking water chestnuts and putting them into brass bowls. Very sensual. This garden is extremely rich in species, and at every time of year something's in flower. Here we have lavender, and dotted throughout the garden are about a dozen homemade beehives so that in winter time you can get considerable cheer from honey mead.
But instead of drinking merrily in our gardens, most people prefer to work, mowing lawns. Yet Mollison thinks this green cancer is a serious threat.
The problem with this agriculture is, although it uses up more resources than what most of us think of as agriculture, that is food agriculture, it has no use at all. And the rate up cost is somewhere near $4 per square foot to maintain them annually. And that doesn't count for the cost of the fuel and the manpower and the labour of maintaining these strange deflection states in the city that nobody really uses. Well, being a good urban guerrilla, we might start a revolution by putting a hazelnut in the lawn.
People may not use lawns, but they look at them. All the great gardens of history have been neatly designed, carefully sculptured arrangements, compositions that appeal to our order and aesthetics. We believe in symmetry, and we have built palatial landscapes to overcome our disappointment with nature's chaos. We want to live in a world where nature is tidy, hygienic, and safe. But nature's not worried about aesthetics. It's interested in abundance. Ugly mangrove swamps, for example, are the most productive environment on the planet.
We've always been very ambivalent in our approach to mangroves. They're not easily accessible. They're muddy and smell a little bit and they're spiky.
The smell is a sign of its fertility. The decomposing organic matter provides the food for the hundreds of fish and crab species that breed within its waters.
For years we've been filling them in, cutting mangroves down. We've been dredging out these streams and turning them into middle-class residential suburbs. The high tide marks clearly indicated here on the retaining walls by a black line, and that leaves you 1 or 2 feet of sea level rise within our projections of the 40-year sea rise. All this capital, all this effort, all these people won't be here because most of this will be sea, shallow seas. It may be a lot more productive, but it's surely going to lay waste a tremendous amount of human effort and resource.